In this video, I'm going to walk through rappelling, specifically rappelling for multi-pitch sport climb scenarios. If you don't know, my name is Mike Vert. I've been climbing for 11 years. I have a diploma in outdoor adventure, and I love teaching climbing online. My goal is to get you outside safely and quickly. I've broken it into 7 steps here so that you can easily walk through all of them. Feel free to look in the description and figure out where you want to sit if you want to skip some parts. The first thing, real quick, I'm just going to go over what is rappelling. So rappelling is the act of descending a rope. So you can see here I have it going through a couple pieces of metal. And if I was to rappel off this, I would fix myself to this rope and self-manage myself coming down. So I'm controlling my own speed with my own hands and body. Lowering would be if someone else is lowering you or you are lowering someone else. But rappelling is when you are controlling your descent. So now we're going to talk about rappel devices, and I have a few of them in front of me here. I'm going to first talk about the one that I use most often, which is this. It is a tube style device. So the way this device works is basically you would take 2 strands of rope and jam it into these 2 holes here, or slide it in, and then you clip the carabiner around that. And then this is what you have clipped to yourself while you're descending. There's a lot more to rappelling, but that's how this device works. You don't need this fancy hole for this part of the rappel, but that is a tube style device. They come in all types. This is an ATC guide from Black Diamond. Do you care which one I'm using? They also come in ones that, as I said, don't have that little loop. But that is, from what I've seen and who I climb with, that's the most common. If you are doing a single rope rappel, which we won't go super deep into on this one, but it is something you can do. You can use a device like a gree-gree, but just know that you can only fit 1 strand of rope through it, which for a lot of types of rappelling, you want that 2-strand rappel. So gree-gree is also available. A couple different tube style devices. One more quick one on the rappel devices, just because I have this here. This is my really old ATC that I don't really use anymore. When you're using these ones, there's teeth that grab onto the rope, and the teeth over time can wear out. So just be aware of that. It still works, it just doesn't grab as much. So this is a fully rigged up rappel system, and I'm going to walk you through everything that's going on this harness and on the rope. So from the top, it's going through 2 pieces of fixed gear that are rounded. Then when we come down to here, I have a tube style device with both ropes running through it. Locked carabiner here with a round stock. Round stock means it's circular rather than edged, and that just makes it roll a little bit better. Not necessary, but highly recommended. On a pear-shaped carabiner or HMS. Through my tube style device, the rope is oriented down towards the teeth. Sometimes on low friction climbs, you can have it flip the other way. With this alone, I could rappel, right? I have a rappel device, but if my hands go off, I basically just deactivate the entire system. So what we want to do is have a backup. And this is what this is down here. You might be wondering, what's this red thing doing here? Talk about that later. But this is my backup device. So this is called a friction hitch, and it's basically a 13-inch piece of stitched material that I wrap around the rope in a certain way and clip it with a locker to my belay loop so that if my hands come off, it's going to grip the rope as if it is my hand. So that is my backup, and we manage that on our way down. Now, the reason why this red thing is here is because this backup device can actually be deactivated by the belay device. So if this device gets in this orientation and it touches or pushes down on the friction hitch, it can deactivate the friction hitch, and then it's as if it isn't there. You probably go down a bit slow because there's a lot of weird friction going on there. But what we want to do is prevent this from being able to hit that. So what we do is we add this sling. So what I've done here for this extension, they call this a rappel extension or an extended rappel, is I have taken a 120 centimeter sling. I have tied 2 knots into it. So you can see it's a 120 centimeter sling, 1 knot here, 1 knot here, and then the end of it. And then I have a locker in the end. And that does 2 things. One, it extends the rappel. So like I said, my friction hitch is not going to be deactivated. But also when I get to my next anchor, I have a personal anchor here and I can just lock it in. So it's all in one system. Generally when I'm multi-pitch climbing, I don't have a personal anchor rigged up to me, but every time I get to the top or we start rappelling, I will set up one of these. And I just throw this on my harness. I don't actually worry too much about locking it when I'm not personal anchored in. So that is the entire system. So once again, through 2 pieces of fixed gear, rappel device with a locking carabiner on an extension, friction hitch, locking carabiner. So that is the rappel system. Next, we're going to talk about rigging a rappel on a multi-pitch. So I'm going to set this up as if I just got to the top of a multi. Oftentimes when you get to a top of a multi-pitch, you usually hang out for a while, chill. You might even walk to a good lookout. But for the case of this scenario, just so you're prepared for basically the quickest turnaround, I'm going to show you what would happen if we were immediately to go into a rappel off the top of a multi-pitch. So what I have set up here is an anchor that I am personal anchored into here. And then this would be my top belay. So my climber's coming up this end and he's coming up to here. So I'm going to show you how we would transition from this into just running through the rings on a rappel. You're going to have to imagine my climbing partner here because I don't have one. But I would belay them up to me. And then they would get here. And at that point, they would need to personal anchor in. So you can just imagine they're probably going to personal anchor up here. They would just throw in, clove hitch. So they would personal anchor into the fixed gear here, and it's important they anchor into the fixed gear rather than the anchor for what happens next. And so they're in there. So they are tied into the end, and they are on their personal anchor here. And at that point, once they tell me they're secure, I can take them off belay. This is the same setup or situation as a normal anchor on top belay or in a multi-pitch, so nothing has changed yet, but it will in a moment. So I take them off here, take off my device, sweet, put that on my harness. Now our next goal is to get the rope running through these pieces of fixed gear. So the first thing I'm actually going to do, I'm going to chill out on my personal anchor for now, and I'm going to build my extension. So you remember in the beginning how I talked about how we need to extend our rappel. So the first thing I'm going to do is set up my extension. So what I do is I grab the stitching, go like an inch or two from that, go around my belay loop, girth hitch it through the belay loop, and then I'm going to tie those knots that I showed you earlier. So one knot here, one knot a little bit higher, just in case I need to mess around. And then that is all I'm going to do there. And then I'm going to grab usually I like a D shape for this, but it doesn't really matter. I'm going to grab that, and then I'm going to personal anchor in to the fixed gear. So you might be thinking, oh, Mike, that's only one piece of equipment, which is true, but the anchor is keeping it all together. I mean, it's connecting it to the other one, so I'm not too worried about that now. You can actually see it's not weighted now, so I might even opt to throw another knot in if I was in this kind of anchor setup. Might throw another one there, just so I'm actually weighting this, and I'm not weighting the personal anchor. Because what you don't want to do is have slack in this, because if you fall on it, when it has slack, it can be really dangerous. So now I have my personal anchor. I'm going to undo this one. Sweet. Take off this carabiner. I trust one bolt a lot, but we do have redundancy as long as these two are connected via this. Okay, so now I need to untie. So I'm untying so that I can get the rope out and feed it through these chains. My partner would be untying as well. And actually, the partner's end of the rope will be the one that you're probably feeding through first, because you've been stacking a pile here, so he is on top. So even though I'm untying now, and I'm going to throw a stopper knot in, which we always use stoppers. There's been so many fatalities and serious injuries from people not tying a stopper knot. So I go 30 centimeters from the end, a little bit more. I have a lesson on this knot too, but I'm going to wrap around once, second time, push it through, and then I pull it tight. And I want to make sure that I have that 30 centimeters at the end. My buddy's doing the same. He would rig up his personal anchor while I'm doing this, and then he would just throw it on there, so he wouldn't need this one anymore, or she wouldn't need this one anymore, so you just have to imagine that they're on a personal anchor. And then, like I said, we're actually going to use their end, or whichever end's on top, but it would be the climber's end usually. So I'm going to grab the other end of the rope here. So now they're personal anchored in over there. We have his end or her end of the rope in our hands. So before we tie the stopper knot in this, we're actually going to feed it through the chains. We have two chains that are rounded at the bottom, or quick links more accurately. So I'm going to feed the rope through those two quick links. 1, 2. So now it's going through both of those. And before I do anything else, I'm going to tie a stopper knot in. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we are going to pull this rope looking for the middle mark. But generally, you want to kind of coil up the rope for the first little bit. So I'm pulling the rope down, and it's feeding off of my pile. And depending where you're throwing this rope to, sometimes there's trees or a ledge or something weird. You may want to actually have this on your hip and not throw it. But in a lot of scenarios, it is quite clean under you, especially if you're climbing like higher grades that are more steep. So I would just throw this down, and that weight of the rope down there is going to help me pull the rest of the rope here. What we do is we pull it till the middle mark of the rope, and there's usually like a black spot on the rope in the middle. So look for that. And then once you're there, you know that you have the most distance possible underneath you. So once I'm at that situation, I'm going to clip this up here just to get this out of the way. So once I'm in that scenario, next thing I want to do is I want to get on rappel. So obviously one person has to go first on the rappel situation. So let's just say I'm going first. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my friction hitch or my third hand backup, whichever word you want to use. I'm going to put that on the rope first. So I need this, and then I also need a D-shaped carabiner. And sometimes what I do is I'll actually clip it to my harness right away. And then I get the stitching if you're using a hollow block. Okay, so it's on my harness. I'm gonna wrap it around once, twice, and then the third time I'm gonna come back to the D-shaped carabiner and lock that. So that is my friction hitch. If you want, you can test it out at this point. Just stand up a bit and test it. And the reason I put this on first is because sometimes the weight of the rope is quite heavy. So I'm gonna actually pull up a bit. And then, as you can see here, it gives me all of this. So even if the rope is being pulled down, the friction hitch will prevent it from getting pulled. So I have this nice loose piece of rope here. Next, I'm going to set up the actual rappel device. So I'm gonna put it on the extended rappel here. Remember, it's on the same system as my personal anchor. And I'm actually gonna put it on the, I'll put it up here. And what you want to do is make sure that it's oriented, as I said, towards the teeth if you want the most friction. So that would be this way for me. Then I'm gonna grab those 2 strands of rope and push it through. Once I push it through, I'm going to clip. And this part is an essential piece too, because this is one of the only spots where you're connected on one thing to the system. So you want to make sure that this is locked and it's running through 2 ropes and this little black thing here, if you're using this style device. So now I have my rappel device on, and I just pull it up. What I do is I grab the carabiner and I just pull it up really high so that it gets as close to the anchor as it can. Then I'm going to bring up my friction hitch as well. And my goal here is to deactivate my personal anchor, okay? Now at this stage, we've thrown down one half the rope. We would have thrown down the other half as well. So usually you have 2 people doing this, so you're both kind of just navigating. If one person's setting up the rappel, the other person might be throwing rope. But if you're managing everything, just remember you have to throw both rope or have them both on saddlebags, which I'll put at the end because it's kind of an advanced technique. Anyway, so we're back here. I've lifted up my blade or rappel device all the way to here. I've lifted up my friction hitch. I test my system. So I'm actually gonna sit back on the rappel device and loosen my hand a little bit just to test that this friction hitch will work. And you can see here, I'm not using the personal anchor at all. So that's what you wanna look for. It's loose and you're putting all your weight on it. Whoa, I almost knocked this over. And you're putting all your weight on it and it's not falling over. So at that point, I am comfy to take off. As long as I have my hand on the rappel, I'm comfy to take this off. And then I usually clip this. You can clip it anywhere. You can clip it to that. It just depends how long it is. But you are now ready to rappel. So then you hang off the side and you lower down, right? And as I'll go this way so you can see. As you're going, you're basically managing the friction hitch, and then you push up rope. and that loop deactivates the teeth and the friction, and then it lets you go down. If you're on something that's very low angle, then you're gonna have to help it a lot. If you're on something that's very vertical or almost overhanging, sometimes your feet are off the ground, then you won't have to do too much to let it slide through because gravity is working with you. I'm gonna tell you what I would do at the next station in the next part of this video, but my friend would basically do the exact same thing. He would put up his rappel device, his third hand, and then he would rappel down, and when he comes down, he's going to take off these as well. That way there's no anchor left. That would be the first rappel. If you were transitioning from leading or climbing to rappel, we're gonna talk about how to get to the next station and what I would do when I get down there. Okay, now I've arrived at my next anchor, and the first thing that I have to do is get personal anchored in. So my goal is to get personal anchored so I can come off this rope entirely and I can let the next person rappel, because they can't set up on a rappel until this is totally unweighted because it's too tight to get their system in. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna open up my personal anchor, which is here. And I have a couple options, as I showed before, for the extension, how much length I would like. But I'm actually gonna, this anchor conveniently has 2 chains. So I'm actually going to keep my hand on the brake strand here, and I'm gonna orient these 2 chains together and clip it here and lock it. So you can see I get redundancy off the personal anchor by clipping the 2 chains. And the reason why I didn't want to go in the bottom is because we're going to be using these for rappelling off. Importantly, on the angle, I don't really want more than 90, and ideally I want a lot less than 90. So that's why I chose up there. Yeah, so that's my personal anchor. I'm actually going to switch, I'm going to keep it behind just for the video example, but generally I would probably want it in front just so it's a little easier to undo when it gets pinned to the rock, but we'll keep it behind for now. Okay, so now I have my personal anchor on. So what I can do now is I would probably just actually keep rappelling until I'm weighted on that, double check my system, and then I can come off this rappel. So I would take this off. I actually leave it on this, so I leave it on the extension, and then I can take off my third hand. Boom. And let's just assume I'm in a comfy position, so I don't mind that this is slightly slacked, but generally you don't want it to be too slacked, but we have a big shelf here. So that's the situation. I come off this, immediately I'm gonna yell up off rappel. That way they know that the rope is loose and they can start rappelling. And then I can start preparing for the next rappel, because we have, say, a bunch more rappels to go. So if the rappel is super wandering, what you don't want to do is let go of this rope, because say they're coming from way over there, if you let go, the rope's going to fly away, which obviously wouldn't be nice, and then they have to swing in and do all the craziness that you do. But for this example, let's assume it's a pretty straight up and down climb. So what can I do to prepare for the next rappel? Right? Our goal is to get this through the chains, but the rope's going all the way up there. So you might think, oh, I have to wait till this person gets down here before I can do anything. But you can actually start feeding the rope already. So you can take one rope end, pull it up. Now you got to be careful and make sure that you're always managing this rope end, because you're taking out the stopper knot and you don't want to put your other climber at risk. So this is going to be a really quick situation where you're managing the rope at all times, and you're going to loosen the stopper knot, take it out. You're going to feed it through the chains, and then immediately you're tying that stopper knot again. So then, as they're coming down, you already have this through. So they're likely going to have weight on this, so you're not going to be able to pull much more than that, but at least as they get down to you, you're going to be able to just quickly pull it through, and you don't have to do that step. So that is what you can do. Obviously, if the rope's a bit below you while you're waiting, you can pull that up. But generally, at this point, you're kind of restricted until the person comes down. So second comes down, second rappeller comes down to here. They're going to set up their personal anchor in the same way. So they're probably going to steal these loops or whatever. Doesn't really matter where they clip. And then they're going to come off the rope. Now, once they come off the rope, now it's kind of game time. This is where you can get efficiency, right? So right when they come off the rope, you can start pulling the other side. And what you want, this is going to start pulling down on this side that's already going through the chain, and this one's going to start going up. So that's the sequence. As you pull down on this one's going to go up. So at some point you're going to get to the end of this rope and the knot's going to be there, and you're actually going to undo the stopper knot here because it's going to be going through the chains at the top. And if the stopper knot's still in, then it's going to get stuck on the chains. It's going to be a whole hassle for you guys. So you want to untie the knot, make sure you do that. And then you're going to pull it, and the rope end's going to go above you. It's going to go through that anchor, and then it's going to fall down like this. And now it's going through both chains. Now, importantly, when you pull it through that other anchor, remember it still doesn't have a stopper knot, and oftentimes it'll fly past you. So you then have to pull it up. You have to pull up that rope end and then tie another stopper knot in it. So at that point, you probably throw it down, or you can kind of manage the rope if you need to. But now we have this set up for the next rappel. It's a little bit awkward here with the, I just moved the rope around me so that it's a little less awkward and it's more clear to see. So now we're actually gonna do the same thing here. So I'm going to remember first, and honestly I leave this just hanging off me usually because I know I'm gonna need it next. I'm gonna throw a couple wraps, clip and lock, put a little bit of rope through, have the rappel device already set up, tuck it in here. A little bit of a faff there, and then clip that in, lock it. As I said, I hold the carabiner, I pull this all the way up to the anchor, pull my third hand here. Remember, I'm trying to test my rappel system to make sure I'm not relying on my personal anchor. So I'm gonna sit back on that. So I'm testing this, and you can see here, if you see that this is loose and your personal anchor is loose, that means that the friction hitch is tight. So you can see the friction hitch is grabbing me. That's great to test that, but I actually want to test my rappel. So I'm going to pull the friction hitch down until the rappel is catching. So you can see here, if I weight this, my personal anchor is actually not disengaged because my personal anchor is too high up. So I can't test it. So there's a couple options I could do here. One is I can try and just get my ATC or my tube style device even closer, which might mitigate for that. In this case, it does. So now this is loose and this is firm. So I know that my personal anchor is good to go off. So I will tuck this up, reach up here, take off my personal anchor. Once again, I'll clip this to wherever makes sense. In this case, I'll just clip it back to the belay loop. And then I am rappelling down. And then we just repeat over and over and over again. I'll probably make a second video here to explain the little nuances like single rope, double ropes, some really basics, but I'll make that a separate video just because this has already covered a ton and I want you to be able to come back to this. So that is the basics of rappelling. If you're interested in outdoor rock climbing and this type of video is interesting to you, you've probably watched the whole thing, so I'm sure you are. I have a 30-day program that prepares you for sport climbing outdoors, single pitch and multi-pitch. It's a structured program. I give you feedback the whole way through, or my team does. So if you want to learn more about that and you're serious about getting outdoor climbing, you're watching videos like this, you're super stoked, there is a link in the description. Click on that. It'll tell you about the whole program. I would love to see you in there, and climb safe.